I was just a sophomore in high school, and I fell head over heels for this new quiet kid and thought that he was my forever. Crazy, but I would actually go on to marry down the road just 1 week after graduation. High school sweethearts. Huh. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I noticed, but ignored because I was young and eagerly wanting to be a grown up. Fast forward, the night before my wedding, I was going over last minute wedding details with my mom, who is easily one of the most caring and selfless people I know. So bless my sweet mama's heart when I asked her if she would be mad if I decided that I didn't want to go through with a wedding. But me being me, my mom thought I was messing with her. I couldn't tell her the truth what was going on now, so I took a deep breath and forced out a believable chuckle. She generally thought it was just one of my jokes. I went on to finally tell her the truth almost a year after I escaped him, and she still feels bad for not taking it seriously. No one knew what was going on behind closed doors, but makes sense. I honestly was his biggest PR team. Only 2 hours had passed since saying I do's, and he was throwing me out of his truck in my parents' driveway, cussing and yelling at me that he wanted a divorce, recklessly driving off. So much for the honeymoon phase on our actual honeymoon. I ran inside and my dad came out of the bedroom and he couldn't understand a word I was saying, but he was basically trying to ask me what was happening. I say it as loud and clear as I could, while uncontrollably sobbing. He left me. How could he, on our honeymoon? My dad is pissed, but then tries to relax, like maybe he forgot something, pulling a bad joke, or something like that. Then we see his truck flying into our driveway, and my dad smiles and says, "See, he's right there." I wipe my tears and walk out the door, and tell him, yes, it was a prank. Inside, I was screaming. I was so embarrassed for myself because now I look crazy, but if I wanted to save this relationship, they could never know the truth. Months go by and he starts being sweeter, ever since we had to be long distance because he was in the military at training. But soon, I would be packing up my life and moving to Texas with him. I could tell that my parents started seeing the cracks that I worked so hard to glue together. My mom even picked up my phone on the table, mistaking it for hers, and saw a huge message from him and just started crying, begging me to stay because he was not a good person. But I assured her that this was way out of character for him, a lie, and that he was just lonely. I knew she didn't believe me, but she also knew that I was stubborn and was gonna do whatever, regardless of her concerns. After just a few weeks in Texas, I knew my life was in danger. It was Thanksgiving Day and my family just called to check on us and tell us happy Thanksgiving. And at the moment I hung up, the man I thought was my soulmate started cursing at me and saying that I need to stop talking to my family because he's my family now. I let out a little chuckle, thinking that he's gotta be joking, and he picks up our wedding glasses and throws them directly at me, shattering all around me. Shocked, I didn't know what to do, so I walked over with a broom to start sweeping up the broken glass. You may be reading this and think surely he was done throwing a tantrum by now, but no. He then throws picture frames at me while I'm sweeping up the glass. Honestly, that broken glass on the wood floor was just a metaphor for any love I had left towards that man. I broke that night. I stopped seeing him as my other half and more of a monster that I'm now stuck with. I became very depressed, and he loved that. He would break me down over and over again just to get a reaction. 2 months go by, and one night he completely lost his shit over the washer and dryer people messing up the days that they were supposed to come out, and he started pacing back and forth, mumbling words that I couldn't quite make out, but demanded that I call and fix it. He grabbed me and sat me on the couch telling me what to say, and that I better not fuck it up, like a damn negotiation. This man was paranoid as fuck, making comments that they were doing it because he was a soldier. Then he started blaming me, even though I wasn't around him when he called in the first place. But he still yelled at me for hours until he walked into the bedroom. I'm on the couch still, processing this fucking moment. He said, "You're so fucking stupid. This is your fault. Did you plan this with the workers just to make me look dumb? Or are you really just as fucking dumb? Huh? You fucking bitch? That's why I fucking thought you no good fucking ungrateful bitch." "You know what? I'm done," I replied. You won't do anything except complain and bitch at me, blaming me for everything. All you do is cuss and yell at me for no damn reason." He looked at me with this look I've only heard other victims try to describe the best that they could describe it. A darkness in his eyes, like an emptiness that still causes me nightmares to this day. Without hesitation, he lunges at me in the middle of the day with our curtains open, door wide open, neighbors out and about. He throws me against the wall and starts choking me. I slowly see black, but he lets go only for a second because then he slammed my entire body on the floor. At the moment, I either blacked out or my brain was trying to shield myself from what was happening. But piece by piece I would come to, and he was holding me by my shoulders and just repeatedly slamming me on the wood floor. My screams were ignored by people outside. I pleaded for anyone to call the police and repeated yelling for help over and over. My fight or flight takes over and chooses flight. I ran to the main bathroom and locked the door, frantically calling my mom because, in the moment, I just wanted to hear her voice, unsure if it would be my last time. But my poor mom didn't know the nightmare of the phone call until it was too late. She was with my sister and my dad, and she put me on speakerphone because they usually do this so they all can talk to me. But instead, they hear me screaming for my life and hear my ex calling me awful names and telling me to get my ass out there and unlock the door. They were confused, and my dad was ready to come and kill this asshole himself. But then silence. No more banging, just me softly crying. And just to call my mother over the phone that I'm alright and I know that I need to leave him. But I had to do it in the safest possible way because if he were to catch me, I may not make it out with my life. When I walked out of the room, my ex was just sitting there with a blank stare, like nothing happened. This was a theme throughout our 3-year relationship, but I could no longer ignore the escalation of his behavior. So one night, I put my escape plan into action. I was gonna make a run for it. It was 2 a.m. Keys to my Pontiac were on the kitchen table, and he was asleep in the bedroom that I wasn't allowed in. I busted out of the guest bedroom that was my prison and beelined it to the front door as quickly as I could. 9.5 hours to my home state, only stopped in Dallas to fill up for gas. With every mile I put in the rearview mirror, I felt something inside reassure me. I'm free now. Forever scarred, but most have healed or faded. 100% believe had I stayed, I'd be 6 feet deep. So to my abusive ex-husband that I fled from that late February night, let's not meet again ever. When I first got out of the army, I was in a relationship with this guy in 3rd Ranger Battalion. Let's call him Jim. Jim Reedus. He and I had an apartment together, and I thought I loved him, so instead of going back to my home in Nebraska, I stayed in Columbus, Georgia. Our relationship started out with him being what I thought was protective over me. Even though I was very attractive at the time, I had a very low self-esteem because of an assault I experienced when I was living in the barracks and the bullying I endured afterwards. Things moved very quickly. In fact, we were inseparable from the night we met. Anytime another man looked at me, he would get very confrontational towards the guy. I felt safe and protected by this. It made me feel special. I thought he must really value me if he would get upset by a guy looking my way. At first. Soon later, when we would be out at a bar, he would get hammered every time and act very nasty towards me if he thought I was looking at another guy. This would cause bitter fights, and I would always end up in a fetal position in bed, sobbing. But still, I stayed. The next day, he would always apologize, making excuses about it being because he was so drunk. But then he would proceed to explain to me why what I had done was wrong. It wasn't long before I felt myself isolated from all my friends and family. Because he was so insecure, he made me take all my phone calls on speakerphone. My family begged me to leave, but I was afraid I couldn't get by on my own. Then one night, when he came home from the bar in his usual fashion, him screaming in my face and me sobbing, I told him I was going to get a room in a motel and he lost his freaking mind. He yanked the keys out of the ignition and threw them in a wood line. He then got out of my car and proceeded to kick in the front quarter panel of my car. He used so much force that the hinges to my passenger door were bent. I told my insurance company that it was a hit and run, or I would have never been able to get the damages fixed. He screamed at me to get inside the apartment, but I couldn't unlock the door without my keys, which he blamed me for. He then grabbed me and started shoving me into the door, first by my shoulder, then with his hands around my throat, screaming, "Can't you see how much I love you?" I rasped, No, I can't." He let go and I fell to the ground in a heap. That night, I finally had enough. I was finally so angry that I didn't feel afraid anymore. That morning, while he was sleeping it off, I began to make plans. I started by telling him he had to leave and move back to the barracks. When he refused, I had to get his chain of command involved to make him leave and go back to the barracks, someone's couch, in the street, just as long as it wasn't with me. He stalked me mercilessly. I filed for an OP, but he bullied me into dropping it. I knew I would never be free from him if I stayed. So my parents sent me some money via Western Union, and I rented a Penske truck and a trailer and got help from my neighbor guy friend to load it up as soon as the sun set and brought it out from where I had hidden it. My best chance was to leave under the cover of darkness. I was really sick that night. I was running a fever of 103, but I knew it had to be then. It couldn't wait. I just told myself that I just had to get out of the city limits, then I could pull over and sleep a little bit. I figured that I would just drive as much as I could, and then rest when I couldn't push it any harder. I put my puppy in the cab in the truck with me, towed my car behind the truck, and left. I don't know how, except through divine intervention, but I somehow managed to drive nonstop from Fort Benning, Georgia, to my parents' home in rural Nebraska. I stopped only for fuel, at which time I would feed, water, and walk my little dog, Scruffy, use the facilities, and get what food and drink I could afford on my meager budget. I drove 14 hours and pulled into my parents' drive around 10 a.m. Central. I crashed on their old couch and slept for nearly 24 hours straight. I still hoped for nothing but pain and suffering for him. He turned me into pills, then coke, then crack, all while he was on active duty. He was a scumbag of a soldier and a man. He reached out to me on social media a couple years ago. I told him what a piece of steaming shit he was and told him to rot in hell. It felt amazing, even after all those years, to say this to him, and him be the one stammering. I'm actually glad he reached out to me and gave me the opportunity to verbally rip him into shreds. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Jim. So let's not ever meet again. Hi all, 34-year-old female. I'm not looking for advice, I just want to share my story. Many years back, I dated a man-child, relatively the same age as myself. We got along quite well. He presented gentlemanly, hospitable, kind, and loving. In hindsight, things escalated quite quickly. We went from being friends to being exclusive within a month. Not enough time to truly know someone. This story is quite lengthy. I'll do my best to shorten it without leaving out integral details. We saw each other daily. We mostly hung out at his home. That was fine with me in the beginning, as I'm rather introverted. A couple months into our relationship, I started to question why we weren't leaving the house, why we weren't going out and experiencing new things and trying out new hobbies. His responses were always cloudy. He always tried to redirect the conversation, thinking I was stupid and I couldn't tell that this was an obvious avoidance tactic. That was the point where I started becoming curious, and from there it went downhill. I'm not an intrusive person, but considering he was my partner, I had the right to inquire as to why we were isolating ourselves. After some mild questioning for a few weeks, I noticed he began to create distance. This noticeable change was hard to ignore, and pretty much confirmed my suspicions. However, I'm not going to make a decision based on assumptions. I'm ashamed to admit this, but one night while we were sleeping, I went through his phone. I still feel disgusting even though I found 100% proof that I was a side chick. I could not believe it. I still can't. I was with this person daily. It obviously confirmed why we were so confined to his house, but it was perplexing because she had no idea about me. It was about 2 a.m. when I looked through his phone. There was no way I could sleep beside him for the remainder of the morning, so I quietly got out of bed, collected my things, and went home. The next day, I believe he realized what had happened. However, he never contacted me to see why I left. Things remained silent for the entire day, and then I received a phone call later in the evening. I confronted him. Again, I'm ashamed to say this, but I did take photos of the evidence as I knew he would try to gaslight me. The fury in his voice was palpable. He did what a usual abuser would do, blame me for going through his phone while totally ignoring his infidelity. It was utterly pathetic. He had created this delusion that I was going to contact the other girlfriend and tell her all of his wrongdoings, all his infidelity, lying, cheating. I would have done this, however, while I was looking through his phone, I realized that the girl was very sheltered. She was completely oblivious to what was going on. I was afraid that he would retaliate against myself and her, and I thought to myself that she would eventually find out. I do regret not informing her. However, my decision was my decision, and I can't change that. This is where my nightmare begins. He was so paranoid and confident that I was going to contact his girlfriend that he would constantly call me daily and make vague threats against me. I persistently advised him that I would not contact her, that it was none of my business, that she would eventually find out that he was a deceitful, inept brainworm sooner or later. All I wanted was for him to fuck off, leave me alone, and never speak to me again. That was my only request. He obviously didn't take my kind words so well, and he continued to harass me. Only a few days later, things completely erupted. His paranoia exceeded to levels I've never seen before. He sent me threatening messages with the context being, "I have compromising photos of you, and I will release them," as he believed that I would ruin his relationship. I couldn't believe the delusion. No matter what I said, no matter how I phrased it, I even had my mom speak with him at one point, but it was useless. I sent him a message stating that if this was true, and if he ever messaged me again, I was going to call the cops. 5 minutes later, I received 11 messages in succession. A few were videos, photos, and personalized animation of myself. I had never seen those images, videos, and animations before. These were taken without my consent. These were extremely intimate and compromising. Unbeknownst to me, he had cameras set up all around his room. These weren't just threats, these were screenshots of these images, videos, and animations uploaded on various sharing sites. Luckily, he lacked intelligence. He sent me the evidence. There was nothing I could do to stop the uploads. I immediately went to the police. They did manage to take some down. However, there were no promises as once a photo is uploaded, it could be immediately archived. This forever altered my life. I don't see relationships the same. I can't be intimate. I can't form strong bonds. I've become apathetic. I'm forensically observant. I have difficulty trusting everyone, even my family, and so much more. In conclusion, the police were rather efficient and treated me well. I was granted an immediate protection order, family violence order. He broke that quite quickly and called my phone, trying his best to apologize, begging me to drop the charges. He was so pathetic that he got his mommy to bring me and tried to persuade me. I immediately called the police and they took immediate action. This ended up going to court. I won. It's not the result that I wanted. However, he did get his name on the good old sex offender registry, which is far more egregious than people may think. Nevertheless, this is beyond life-changing. To all who have gone through this, I'm sorry. and I feel your pain. Be careful around people who you think you can trust. I know that's quite nihilistic and pessimistic, but those are some of the unfortunate aspects of life. It's quite paradoxical. Humans are social creatures, but many humans are pure rat shit. Hello everyone. I'm very new to posting on here, so please bear with me. I wanted to share my story that has occurred over the last 5 years. This story is about me, currently 20, and my stalker ex, currently 23. 2019 to 2021, the start of our relationship. 5 years ago, I met my ex. I'll call him Alex for my own safety. In early to mid 2019, I came across Alex's profile on Instagram and recognized him as the student who attended the same high school as me. I always thought he was attractive, so I followed him on Instagram, and to my surprise, he actually responded to one of my stories. We started messaging on Instagram back and forth, then both of us quickly found out that we liked each other. One night, when I had fallen asleep on the phone with Alex, I heard his voice coming from the phone whispering something like, "I would rape you," and other things along that manner. I thought I was hearing things, so I brushed it off, thinking I was just dreaming. Eventually, me and him started dating and going on dates. Everything went pretty well, except for the fact that when we would kiss, he would bite me extremely hard, to the point that it would make me bleed. I told him multiple times not to do it, but he would always continue. A couple months into dating, a girl had made a video on Instagram claiming he was a cheater, but he denied to me that he even knew this girl, and I believed him. 10 months of dating went by, and a friend sent me screenshots of him being active on Tinder. I immediately broke up with him after that. A couple months later, I started dating someone new. During this relationship with my new partner, Alex would blow up my phone with messages and calls. I decided to block him. He then started driving past my house every single day. At this point, I had started my first job and he would eventually show up there too. I even moved jobs and he found me there as well. Getting back together 2021 to 2023. The situation eventually died down. Randomly, out of the blue, I got a flower delivery of pink roses. It had Alex's name on the card attached, but nothing written. Being the stupid 17-year-old senior in high school I was, I actually unblocked him and thanked him. He asked me to hang out, and I willingly went to hang out with him soon after we started texting. My 17-year-old self thought it would be cool dating a hot, well-known older boy, so I eventually fell back into Alex. After a couple times of hanging out, we started dating again. I eventually lost my V card to Alex, and we started regularly sleeping with each other. One day he texted me saying that he had a surprise for me, and then sent me an iCloud file. I opened the file and it was a video of us having sex. I had no idea he had been recording us. I couldn't even consent as I was 17 at the time, and he was 20. Again, stupid 17-year-old me stayed with him, regardless of the red flags. Eventually, our relationship became sexually and physically abusive. One night, he raped me while I was intoxicated and unconscious, and left bruises on my head and abdomen. A couple days after that, I decided enough was enough and broke up with him. The stalking, 2023 to 2024. Immediately following the breakup, he would constantly text and call me. He would beg me to see him. I kept denying him, but he kept going. He would threaten to come to my house in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. This happened for a couple months. During this time, I met someone new and we started dating. I was having trouble with my mom, and my new partner asked me to come move in with him. Somehow, Alex found out where me and my new partner were living, so he started showing up at our place. We documented everything from our cameras and ended up filing a restraining order against Alex. We got granted a temp order until our hearing. Our hearing day came and the judge extended the temporary order to let things cool down for 6 months. If he breaks the order, the judge will grant him a long-term order at the next hearing. Within days of extending the temp order, Alex violated it by parking in front of my house on multiple occasions. I called the cops multiple times, but they never even gave him a warning. One day, while I was working, I get a call from my local PD that Alex tried purchasing a firearm, which violates our order. They just warned him not to do that again and had to let me know for my safety. Obviously, knowing that your ex tried to purchase a firearm is scary itself. The following days, he would follow me to work and stand in front of my boyfriend's truck in the early hours of the morning. My current, fleeing 2024. He would start tailgating me on my way to work or swerve in front of me with his car. My boyfriend and I moved somewhere else but are still in the same city. Somehow, Alex still managed to find us. My boyfriend decided that if the cops weren't going to help us, then we would need to leave the state. We ended up packing everything in the middle of the night and driving a state over where my boyfriend's family lives. We've been here about 2 months. My boyfriend and I found good jobs and plan on leasing our own apartment soon. It's been peaceful for the most part. However, I still hear about what Alex does back home. He still tells everyone that we are together, still even posts pictures of me on Instagram. My story is still ongoing, and I've left out a lot of details. Trigger warning for this story, as it has animal cruelty and domestic abuse. I'm a female 22 at the time of writing this. I was almost killed by my ex-boyfriend, male, about 30 now. I will be changing names as to protect myself. I'll start with a quick backstory. At the time of the attack, I was 19, almost 20. My ex, Gavin, was 27. We had a big chow and a cat, the dog being his and the cat being mine. We lived in a 3-bedroom house, the layout being you walked in and to the right is the living room, in front of you is the dining room, and off to the left was the kitchen. Open concept living and dining room, closed kitchen. Down a longish hallway, we had a bathroom to the right and the main bedroom at the end of the hall on the right. Then 2 other bedrooms on the 2 other walls. A few months before, we had allowed our friend to stay with us, Lacey, and it didn't end well as she was just taking advantage of us. The week leading up to the attack, Gavin had gotten back from a work trip, which I believe was about 3 to 4 weeks away from home. The week he was back, he was completely out of it, not being able to complete a thought. I'd ask or tell him something, and less than 5 minutes later he'd completely forget, or just not have heard me, like he was just off in some other world. One day I was very frustrated with this, as I asked him to help me with chores, or for him to take out the garbage, only to be ignored. He said that if it continues, that he wanted me to slap him. We had gone out to dinner with his mom 2 days prior to the attack, and she was obviously very worried about him, as there was clearly something wrong. At the time, the only mental disorder he had, or was aware of, was OCD, which now I'm even more convinced that that is not what he had by any means. The day of the attack, we had just gotten back from grabbing some takeout and were sitting on the couch in the living room. I'd been painting my nails and he was playing Mario Kart. He looked over at me and said, "Lacey put a curse on my family." I was dealing with my own poor mental health at the time, so I wasn't really in a space where I could be focusing on his. I wasn't really sure what to do, so I just suggested that he hop in a cold shower, as it helped him earlier in the week to just reset a bit. He walked into the bathroom and was muttering to himself, and it just felt so off. I don't know how to describe it. I didn't feel safe. I walked over and asked if I can call his mom for him maybe to invite her over for supper, kinda beating around the bush that I wanted her to come and help him. He looked at me and just started yelling that all he needed was me. I walked out and started for the living room as I was calling his mom. He came out of the bathroom naked and started yelling at Ollie, the dog, to discipline me and attack me. Mind you, he was a trained guard dog. At this point, I believe his mom had answered the phone and had heard what was happening. He started to call me lazy and that I needed to pay for what I did. I ran into the bedroom with my phone, still with his mom on the line. He kicked down the door and smashed my head into our mirror closet door and threw my phone on the ground. He was screaming that he was going to kill me. I scrambled out of the bedroom door trying to get to the front door. As I was passing the kitchen, he got a hold of me and wrapped his arms around my throat, again saying that he was going to kill me. I remember looking over to the table and seeing my cat, Sterling, all puffed up. I've never seen him so scared. I was fighting not to go unconscious. I couldn't breathe. I clawed at him, just trying to get his arms off my throat. I remember starting to see black specks in my vision and thinking that I'm gonna die. What is he gonna do with my body? He asked me if I knew what it was like to be raped. This is the part where I'm not sure if he was actually out of his mind, as I had been raped before, and it was a year, that month. I was very open about how that had been affecting me. He threw me to the ground and put his foot over my head, as if to stomp on it. This was the only time I had seen his eyes throughout the entire attack. They were almost lifeless, his pupils so dilated you could barely see the iris. He was yelling over and over again, "Admit it, lazy. You know what you did. Admit it." I just started apologizing, doing and saying anything I could to make him happy. It seemed to have worked, as I got the opportunity to scramble to my feet and race out the door. I just wish I left the screen door open. I ran from house to house in nothing but shorts and a sweater in February in one of the coldest provinces in Canada. I got to maybe 2 or 3 houses before I heard Ollie screaming. It's a sound that I can never get out of my head. I just dropped to the ground screaming and crying, "Gavin, leave him alone." I knew he killed the dog. At that point, a bunch of neighbors had heard the screaming and came running to help. An older couple called the police and brought me into their home, not knowing if they were putting their own lives at risk. My parents were living in a completely different province. Someone gave me their phone to call my mom. She was out for supper with some friends, and I just told her that Gavin killed the dog and tried to kill me. The police finally showed up after what seemed like hours. 5 to 6 cars, firearms out. They used a megaphone to tell him to come out with his hands up. He walked out naked and covered in blood. Once they had gotten him into the car, a police officer came to talk to me while the others searched the house. Shortly after, an officer came up and asked me how many dogs we had. I told him 1 and 1 cat. I asked if Ollie was still alive, and they told me that he was dead in the bathtub. Gavin had killed him in the living room, then brought him into the bathroom, filled up the tub, and put Ollie's body in it. I had asked about the cat, and they said they couldn't find him anywhere just yet. I was sure that he had killed my sweet boy too. Sterling was the only thing I could think about, and I went into panic and was no longer able to give them any more information, as I was basically in tunnel vision. "Where's my cat? I want my cat. Find my cat." The officers asked if there was any treats that would coax him out and where his hiding spots were. They ended up finding Sterling alive but scared, and they couldn't get to him as he was so scared and was attacking the officers. They had blocked off the worst of the scene, so they had me go in and get Sterling. As much as they blocked off, there was still so much blood, and the smell of the blood and feces were overpowering. Sterling was in the bedroom, on the bed, just crying. I scooped him up and asked the officers to find my vape. As I was walking out of the house, Gavin's mom had gotten out of her car. She asked me where Ollie was, and all I could say was, "Gavin killed him." She dropped to the ground and started bawling. I just walked past her and put Sterling in her car and sat in the front seat, not sure what to do as I didn't want to go with her. At that moment, I hated her for what her son did to me and Ollie. To this day, I regret how I acted towards her. I had no right to be so cruel to someone who was also now suffering. My mom had gotten a hold of my aunt that lived a few towns over, so once I was done with the officers, I was to go with her. Once the police were done doing whatever it was that they were doing in the house, I had to go back in to get some clothes and such. They had forgotten to close the bathroom door. Luckily, I wasn't the one that walked by it at first. It was Gavin's mom. The sound she made was horrible. Eventually, my aunt came and I went with her. The next day, I had to go back to the house to get my things, and the police had gotten someone to take care of the body, but not the mess of blood and the body fluids and pee and poop. Half of the stuff, I didn't know what it was. His mom and sister had came to clean the house, blood everywhere, and a lot of broken furniture. His mom was kind enough to clean all my bathroom things and throw anything that couldn't be saved. Unfortunately, I had African black soap. That night, I washed myself with it, and when I looked down, I was washing myself with a bar of soap caked in Ollie's blood. 2 weeks later, Sterling and I were on a plane to my mom. The court case took 2 years, and I only found out later that he had gone to load his guns. For the longest time, I didn't want to know how he killed Ollie, but when they were going through the evidence, an officer mentioned a baseball bat. He only got 10 months house arrest. To this day, 2 years later, he still tries to contact me, blaming me for not getting him help. I think the worst part is I do partly blame myself. Not just for not knowing to get him help, but also for not leaving the door open for the animals, and for bringing that baseball bat into the house weeks prior because I was too lazy to walk to the shed. Let's never meet again, Gavin. I dated this man for about 2.5 years, and he nearly killed me. Very physically abusive, emotionally, sexually, all of it. The last time he hurt me was because I told him I was moving and I was gonna have a roommate. He didn't like that. He strangled me twice and punched me in the face. I escaped and called the cops. He was arrested a few days later. Until then, though, he was coaching me on how I needed to go back to law enforcement and state that I hit myself and he didn't really strangle me, that I stopped taking my psychiatric medicine, and that I was having a psychotic break that night. At the first hearing, I recanted and told the judge all the lies my ex told me to. The judge believed me, and he was set to get released from jail, but he was still under the state county hold or something like that. Before he was supposed to get released, I went back to law enforcement after gaining some clarity and told him the truth again, in which another hearing was scheduled. Undoubtedly, my ex was notified the reason why another hearing was being scheduled. He was a gang member. Obviously, I'm not going to say which one. And as previously mentioned, by now I had moved into a new house with my roommate. But before he got arrested, he asked me where I was moving, and I told him which street corner the house was on, very stupidly. Well, my roommate's boyfriend at the time was affiliated as well. We were with some real winners, huh? And he was apparently notified that my house had been marked by the gang members my ex belonged to. And that showed true. One morning around 6 a.m., my roommate and her boyfriend were sitting in the driveway in their car with the lights off. I was inside the house asleep. A car pulled up in front of the house, blocking the driveway, preventing my roommate from pulling her car out. We are still unsure whether or not these people initially knew there were people sitting in my roommate's car. The mystery car sat there blocking the driveway for a few minutes before a man got out of the passenger seat and began walking directly up the driveway to my porch. Luckily, my roommate's boyfriend had a gun on him, and since he saw the man walking towards the front door, he got out of my roommate's car and flashed his gun at the man. The man saw it and ran back to the car, which sped off. Maybe a few weeks later, I had driven to a gas station a few streets over after the sun had gone down. I was getting a vape or something. When I was walking back to my car, a man in the same car that was in front of my house pulled up next to me and started yelling something. I couldn't tell what he was saying before I just yelled back, "Shut the fuck up and leave me alone," thinking I was just being randomly catcalled. I got out of my car and went to pull out of the gas station, noticing his car sitting in front of the exit I was going to take and not moving. So I went out a different exit and turned back onto the street my house was on. I looked behind me and saw that he was following me. He waited for me to leave before he pulled out and followed behind me. I started going down different streets and he kept tailing, so eventually I freaked out and sped up real fast and made a quick impulsive turn that threw him off my tracks. I didn't go home. Another day I came home from work and saw that the window in our dining room that looks out to the backyard, the only window on the first story that doesn't have iron bars, had been tampered with from outside. It had a screen secured to it so that the window may be opened, and the screen had been ripped off. We reattached it and tried to replicate it by ripping it off ourselves, and it was hard. My roommate's boyfriend was able to, but we weren't strong enough. It would have taken a lot of effort to get that screen off. The last instance, my roommate's boyfriend and his friend had left our house to go on a walk. As they were walking back up to the house, they saw two men peeking through our other dining room window, trying to see inside. They noticed my roommate's boyfriend as he started yelling at them, asking what the fuck they were doing, and they scurried off. My ex's final hearing happened a few months ago, and I've gotten him locked up until 2036. I think maybe his fellow gangbangers have realized that a man locked up for the next 12 years is not worth risking their freedom over anymore, and I have since been left alone. I want to start off by saying that I'm one of the oldest siblings in my family, and my parents divorced a few years back. My mom is one of the strongest women I know. After the divorce, she found someone that was loving and treated us as a family. She met him at an event, and it seemed like they were soulmates. At first, I thought it was meant to be, and they were perfect for each other. He had been so supportive of her, and great to my younger siblings. As one of the older siblings, I brought it on myself to do some research on the guy, just to make sure there weren't any red flags. After looking into it, I found an account with a picture that suspiciously looked like him. After finding this, I brought it to everyone's attention. The account was a sexual account linked to him. I couldn't believe it. I brought it up to my mom, just to be pushed away. A couple months went by just like normal, and we all kind of forgot. Recently, I decided to look up that username on other sites such as Reddit, and I was shocked. What I found was unsolicited pictures of my mom posted for meetups. He was a completely different person than what we knew. He was sneaking explicit pictures of my mom online to meet up with other people. Of course, when I found out, I showed my siblings. With all this proof, we brought it to my mom sobbing, "You have to leave him." At first she was on board and blocked him. More and more came out about the person he truly is. My mom started to distance herself from him. She confronted him and he denied it until he said he would kill himself. Soon after she left town, he found out where she was staying at. He called her hotel phone all night long. In the phone calls, he was yelling, "Answer the phone, bitch. I know you're there. Why are you ignoring me?" As the phone calls were falling on deaf ears, he decided to act on it. At 6 a.m., I got a call from my siblings to check the blink cameras at my house. He decided the best way to handle the situation was to come to the house and try to act crazy and scream into the cameras while playing creepy music at 1 a.m. He ended up stealing the cameras and saying that he was going to throw the cameras in the river. Of course, I woke up extremely concerned and immediately thought he messed with our family dog. Thankfully he didn't and just took the cameras. I proceeded to call the police and get them back while she was out of town. The cops said he seemed off and that she should get a restraining order. After this event, he called my mom and gaslit her. He came to her and said that he's been blacking out and can't remember the events. Sadly, she took his side and believed him. He went on to say that he didn't remember posting her without her consent and that it was his other personality. She completely believed him and wanted to help him as she thought he was mentally unwell. His devious gaslighting plans had worked. There's no way he's telling the truth. I'm so scared that he's gonna hurt us. I don't know how to get rid of this guy. I'm terrified they will get married soon. Any suggestions will help. Okay, this may be a long story, but I'm ready to tell people on Reddit my story of Let's Not Meet. The first started when I was in my first year of sixth form. My friend, let's say her name was Candle. She introduced me to her friend. Let's call her Amanda. I chatted with Amanda for the next 2 weeks simply because she used to message me constantly. She seemed like a nice girl at first, until she made me feel uncomfortable around her, as she used to message me, "I want to cuddle you like a big teddy bear," and similar things to that. I shot that down. She got upset and threatened to call the police on me if I didn't go on a date with her. I'm a gay guy, by the way, but I wasn't out of the closet at this point of my life. I screenshotted everything she said to me, and I showed my friend Candle, and she stated, "Yeah, I believe you. She's a compulsive liar. She lied about her teacher sexually assaulting her, and used to make things up to make her sound better than everyone else." I was so glad Candle believed me, and advised me to block Amanda, which I did. Fast forward 2 years later. I was in college now and encountered her again. I didn't recognize her and was chatting to her without realizing that she was the same Amanda from 2 years prior. That was until I messaged Candle on Facebook, as Amanda told me that she knew Candle. Candle sent me a long paragraph. You do realize that's Amanda, right? Then it all came flooding back to me. She was right. It was the same girl who threatened to call the cops on me for not going on a date with her. She was dating a friend of mine in college, now my bestest friend. I tried to warn him, but he didn't listen to me. Amanda claimed to have a crush on me the second time. I shot it down right away and told her I'm not interested. She obviously took offense to that and threatened to call the police again, to which I replied, "What's police gonna do? This isn't a police matter," which by the look on her facial expressions angered her even more, but she walked off. A couple of weeks go by. I ended up telling my friend about what she's been messaging me, and he obviously believed me as he saw her messages in real time. She kept asking me to go on a date and saying she liked me since day one. But here's the thing, she was in a relationship with my friend. Naturally, my friend got upset and called her right in front of me. She claimed that she had no idea what he was talking about and told him I was making up lies. Then he forgave her as she admitted it was true just a week later. To my annoyance, she began hanging out with us. I was nice to her because I didn't want to get my friend upset. She tried telling me that she had 2 children at 17, with one being 13 and the other one being 3. I thought that was odd. How is she 17 and having a 13-year-old child? She would have been 4. Something wasn't adding up. She stated that she was sexually assaulted when she was young. I should have called her out, but my friend was there, and I didn't want to upset him. She even stated that the 3-year-old child was my friend's daughter. Even he looked confused, like it was the first time he heard about this child. When she went home, I asked him. He stated, "No idea. She's never mentioned the child before, and we definitely never had sex. Very strange." Fast forward a year, and I was working in a shop. She suddenly showed up and asked to speak to me. My manager let me go on a 30-minute lunch. She was there with her friend, and she wanted to tell me that my best friend, let's officially give him a name, Marcus, was manipulating her and was always hurting her, which I knew for a fact wasn't true. Marcus wouldn't hurt a fly. but I listened to whatever else she wanted to say. She said that she was trapped in a relationship with him, and she felt scared of him. No idea if she was telling me this knowing that I did not like her. I made it seem like I believed her and headed back to work. I came home and FaceTimed Marcus and told him everything she was saying earlier that day. He started crying his eyes out because he found out she cheated on him with another guy. A friend of his showed a picture as proof and forwarded it to me. It was definitely a picture of her and some guy kissing on a bus. I told Marcus he needs to get away from her ASAP, which he did, until the next day they were back together as he yet again forgave her. We started doing group video chats, me, Marcus, and Amanda, at her request. And remember the 3-year-old from the year prior? Well, now she's 5 years old, called Lily, who literally never existed. I asked her about the 13-year-old she mentioned, and she replied with, "I don't have a child other than Lily." The next couple of months go by, and she used to say, "Lily's in bed," or "Lily's in school," etc. When I would call her out to show us Lily, she would turn on the camera to a pitch black area of the bedroom and quickly put the camera back to her. I thought this was odd and said, "Why'd you move the camera so fast? We didn't see anything." She replied, "Because she's camera shy," or "she's asleep." I couldn't take this anymore. It was excuse after excuse. If Lily was Marcus's daughter, he deserves to see her, as he's literally never met or seen this Lily, not even once. I sent her a long message stating that Lily does not exist. Why no pictures of her? Then I blocked her because I had enough of her playing games with my best friend. She then went on people's Facebook, and I kid you not, she took photos of random people's children and claimed them as Lily. Marcus and I looked at each other, as we knew these were different pictures of random kids. Some of them weren't even girls. This went on until one day me and Marcus went to Amanda's mother's workplace, and Marcus showed her all the messages, especially the ones about this Lily, and the many pictures of her and some random guy she met up with. Some of the men Amanda met up with were like 50 or 60 years old. We found her on the dating website asking for men to fatten her up. We showed everything to Amanda's mother. Her mother was furious. She said Amanda never had kids. She was never sexually assaulted as a child, and knew something was odd as she had gotten into a random man's car just the day before. I thought this would be the end of Amanda, but I couldn't be more wrong, as Marcus, like an idiot, met up with her that evening and forgave her for the millionth time. And then something strange happened the next day. Marcus called me on FaceTime and he was furious at me. I asked him what's going on and what did I do. He told me I was a bad friend and he wants to cut me out of his life. I was in shock. I heard Amanda laughing in the background, then it clicked. She said something about me which wasn't true, and now me and Marcus were arguing like crazy. He blocked me on everything, which broke my heart, as this boy was my best friend, and now he's believing his compulsive lying girlfriend over me. Marcus and I were having on and off arguments all the time, and Amanda was the root of it, telling him lies and manipulating him, as if she was jealous of our friendship. Maybe she thought I was a threat to her relationship with Marcus, and tried to split us up as best friends. She literally used to invite me out with them, and when I would turn up, she used to be like, "I want to spend time with you. Why is he here?" Excuse me? You're the one that invited me. This happened every single time until one time, I slapped back at her, which made her cry. But I didn't care, she needed to stop doing this to me, as it wasn't healthy for my mental health. A few weeks go by. Marcus was texting me on Facebook Messenger, and we were having a laugh like we used to. He went to the toilet as he was at Amanda's. Then I suddenly got a text from Marcus saying, "Hi, it's Amanda." I replied with, "Hey," And then she started sending me threatening messages saying, I need to leave Marcus alone. He doesn't like me, and I need to move on. I was like, what the fuck? I ended up arguing with her over this, saying why the hell is she using his phone to send me these messages? Amanda was like, I dare you to come say that to my face. At this point, I had enough of this and contacted a friend of mine, let's call her Jasmine, and told her the situation as I ended up in tears on the phone. I've known Jasmine since primary school, and we had been close friends since. So naturally, she got defensive and asked me to get in her car and she'll drop me off wherever they were so I could say it in her face. Jasmine wanted to hurt Amanda for what she's done to me. We saw them and we confronted them. Marcus generally had no clue until I showed him the messages Amanda sent me on his phone. He was furious and walked off in tears. I ran after him, leaving Amanda and Jasmine alone. Marcus and I hugged it out and we talked about what happened. He was telling me that he wasn't allowed friends anymore, and Amanda even made him choose between her and his family, which made me even more furious. I had enough of the way she was treating my best friend. The next day, Jasmine messaged me and said that she cannot be friends anymore, as I was bullying Amanda for months, which wasn't true as I wouldn't bully anyone. I said to Jasmine, if she was my real friend, she would know that Amanda was lying, but she didn't. To this very day, I never saw Jasmine again. This felt like a big betrayal of our friendship, and I really would never talk to Jasmine ever again. This was over 6 years ago now. Marcus and I were getting better, and he wasn't letting Amanda manipulate him anymore. This was until these boys came into our lives. Well, first, it was another girl I was friends with called Alice. I've known Alice for years and invited her out with me and Marcus to a pub for a few drinks. It was a nice evening, and Alice even called Amanda and told her that she needs to leave Marcus alone. We were drunk. That evening, we said our goodbyes, as I'm naturally worried for Marcus, as he's like a little brother to me at this point. Alice asked if I was gay, which I am gay, but I wasn't out of the closet at this point, so I responded with no. Then Alice said, then why are you worried about Marcus? You obviously fancy him. I tell her, well, no, he's like a brother to me, and we've been through a lot because of Amanda, so I obviously do care about him. I thought to forget about this conversation, as I assumed she was just making conversation. Alice messaged Marcus, asking him out on a date on a messaging app, and by the end of the week, they started dating. I was happy that he was moving on from Amanda. Boy, was I wrong. I started receiving messages from Alice's brother and his friend, stating to slice my throat and messaging Marcus to help them beat me up. We were talking to joining a group video call. The call contained me, Marcus, Amanda, and Alice's brother and his friend. They said horrible things towards me, saying that I should die and I hurt women, which wasn't true. It was more of Amanda's lies, and I was messaging Marcus to back me up because he was being quiet while I was trying to defend myself against these guys. He just read the messages and still sat there, saying nothing. At this point, I had enough and just left the call and left the group and blocked a lot of them apart from Marcus. Marcus called me the next morning saying that he's sorry for not defending me. I replied with, well, that isn't good enough. They were literally threatening me. Marcus went quiet, then said sorry again, but by this point, I ended the call because I couldn't be bothered with the stress anymore. Next thing I know, Alice was denying that she ever dated Marcus and claiming I made a fake account of her on the messaging app. Are you serious, mate? I also noticed Alice being besties with Amanda on Facebook, so that was the puzzle fitting. At this point, I wanted to end my life. I was at my lowest. I was losing all my friends because of this Amanda. This was the start of my depression getting worse and worse. Marcus and I eventually made up and we were best friends again, but there was a time period where we didn't talk for over a year. I guess that was me trying to move on with my life, but eventually we started talking again and Marcus and I met up again, just the two of us. He was saying how sorry he was for everything he's done. I said it was okay. He was under Amanda's control. Fast forward to 2024. Marcus has a new fiancée who is a lovely girl, and I'm going to be the best man at his wedding because I stopped him from jumping every time Amanda cheated on him. I was always there for him. He now sees that I was always there for him and we're closer than ever. He even defends me a lot more nowadays and always has my back. I've seen Amanda here and there a few times, but don't acknowledge her or them, as Amanda is now non-binary, which I don't believe, as it could just be another lie for attention, but I'm not judging. If that's how they feel, that's up to them. But that doesn't change the person who nearly destroyed my life. Last time I saw Amanda was last year at Pride. They are pointing at me showing their current boyfriend who I am. I didn't notice until my other best friend, not Marcus, pointed it out to me. That was the last time I ever saw her, and hopefully we never meet again. There's a lot of missed out on the story, as it happened over a couple years, but I just want to say, Amanda, let's never meet ever again.